This is the X-Zone Broadcast Network, broadcasting worldwide on broadcast affiliates and satellite program providers, including CNN Broadcast Network, Sirius Satellite Network, Star Media, Good News Radio Network, Angel Broadcast Network, Wiki Broadcast Network, and WPBN TV. For more information on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, visit us at www.xzbn.net.
If you're a seeker, don't miss the inspiring book Shamanic Awakening, Between the Dark and the Daylight. This remarkable work chronicles shamanic counselor and indigenously trained dream decoder Sandra Cochran's 35 years of experience with diverse wisdom keepers throughout the Americas. Sandy's initiations across the British Isles, Turkey, Greece, and Egypt, combined with her knowledge of symbology, psychology, and myth, influence her dream blog and workshops. Sandy offers private readings, sacred international journeys, a meditative CD, and her book, Shamanic Awakening, to encourage you as you navigate your earth walk and create a deeper connection to yourself. Find this and more at her website, starwalkervisions.com.
This is A Different Perspective with Kevin Randle. A retired U.S. Lieutenant Colonel, Kevin Randle has been studying UFOs for nearly 50 years. Kevin has investigated some of the most famous UFO cases in the world and has been consulted for dozens of documentaries about UFOs. Considered one of the leading experts into the Roswell UFO crash of 1947, Kevin has written more than 25 books about UFOs, including the recently published Roswell in the 21st Century. Now, here is the host of A Different Perspective, Kevin Randle.
Good evening. Tonight we're joined by Stan Gordon, who since 1965 has been conducting on-scene investigations of mysterious encounters in Pennsylvania. He has been involved with the examination of thousands of UFO and other strange reports from across the state. During the late 1960s, Stan acted as a telephone report sighting coordinator for the UFO Research Institute in Pittsburgh. Stan served as a Pennsylvania State Director of the MUFON UFO Network for many years and was the first recipient in 1978 of the annual MUFON Meritorious Achievement in a UFO Investigation Award. Stan also continues to investigate information concerning the controversial UFO crash retrieval case, which occurred on December 9th, 1965 near Kecksburg in Pennsylvania, and has been the primary investigator of that event for many years. Stan Gordon, welcome.
Hi, Kevin. It's great to hear your voice again. It's been quite a while since we crossed paths out there.
I think that's right, and I blame you completely.
Got to blame somebody.
Absolutely. I think what we'll do is, I know you're interested in cryptoid reports as well. I think we'll talk a little bit about that because there's a petition online for StopKillingBigfoot.com. And it's about, a documentary that they're going out and trying to assassinate a Bigfoot to prove that they really exist. And I know that you've done some investigation of a Bigfoot, and I was looking at some of the things that you have posted about that. For example, just last January on the 1st, you interviewed a man who had seen some kind of a hairy creature, brown-covered creature, along a road as he was, going home or visiting the area for the holidays. You want to tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, well, that actually, that occurred January 1st, and that was right between Allegheny County and Westmoreland County, so it was near Monroeville and Trafford, and interviewed the fellow. Another fellow who knew the fellow recommended that I talk with him. He was home visiting relatives in the area and left early that morning to go back home. And the headlights of the car in front of him caught this figure walking along the side of the road, and his first thought was, why was somebody walking along the road at this time of morning? But he soon realized that what he was seeing was about a 6-foot-tall, hair-covered creature, bipedal creature covered with brown hair. He said it had long arms hanging down past the knees and walked with a hunch. And his headlights hit the main feature, which was the glowing eyes on the creature, glowing red eyes. And he only saw it for, of course, seconds, but he said he was certain other people saw it as well. But there's been a history of other sightings of Bigfoot in that particular area for many, many years. Over the years, I've investigated hundreds of Bigfoot sightings and interviewed many, many witnesses. And sightings in Pennsylvania go back to at least the accounts from the Native Americans, and there were newspaper accounts in the 1800s. So it's a phenomenon that's been with us for a long, long time. But very interesting accounts, and we had some amazing sightings last year, even much more detailed than one we just talked about.
Well, I always have had the impression, Pennsylvania being back east, at least relative to where I am, that you don't think of it as a hilly area or a forested area, but I guess where a creature like this could hide from public view. So I guess that's kind of a misperception on my part.
Oh, yeah. Pennsylvania is full of mountains, and it's very dense with forest and wood areas. And there are many, many sightings, particularly along the Chestnut Ridge. And it's not just Bigfoot. The Chestnut Ridge is about a 100-mile-long mountain range that extends from Preston County, West Virginia, through Westmoreland, Fayette, and Indiana County in southwest PA. The Chestnut Ridge, historically, is probably one of the most active areas in the country for year-after-year phenomena. UFO sightings, Bigfoot encounters, Black Panther sightings. We have what we call Thunderbird sightings of these huge birds with these massive wingspans like a small aircraft. Mystery booms, all kind of strange phenomena goes year after year along the Chestnut Ridge.
So Pennsylvania is a hotbed of paranormal activity, from what you're saying, from not only the cryptoids, but the UFO aspect of it and some other things going on as well. Stan, we're going to have to take a quick break here. And when we come back, I think we'll talk a little bit more about that, and then we'll get to the elephant in the room, which, of course, is the Kecksburg UFO crash. So if you get a chance, take a look at www.kevinrandle.blogspot.com for more information, and we will return right after these messages, so stick around.
This is the X-Zone Broadcast Network, broadcasting worldwide on broadcast affiliates and satellite program providers, including CNN Broadcast Network, Sirius Satellite Network, Star Media, Good News Radio Network, Angel Broadcast Network, Wiki Broadcast Network, and WPBN TV. For more information on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, visit us at www.xzbn.net.
How would you like to be able to read other people's minds? Well, the next best thing is here. When you know how to read a person's name, you know how the person thinks, feels, and behaves. Each letter in our name holds a key to unlock our true essence. Our name contains both our gifts and challenges in this lifetime. Mnemology science discovers personality secrets hidden in the placement of the letters of our names, including the first and last impression people remember about us. Sharon shows us how to interpret the arrangement of letters as outlined in her book, Know the Name, Know the Person. Sharon Lynn Wyeth created mnemology science after 18 years of research and testing her theories, and has supported thousands of people around the world in understanding themselves and others better. You'll enjoy Sharon's unique teachings as she shares her system to learn the gifts behind your given birth name. Even if you don't like your birth name, there are jewels in this book. If you're thinking of changing your name, ready to name your child, or wanting to get along better with others, this is the book for you. If you'd like to improve your relationships and change your life for the better, get the book today, Know the Name, Know the Person, or visit www.knowthename.com. That's www.knowthename.com.
Take a step back in time and discover old Florida cuisine at Marsh Landing Restaurant in Fellsmere, Florida. Enjoy delicacies such as frog legs, gator tail, catfish, and swamp cabbage, or enjoy the more traditional cuisine such as hand-cut Angus steaks, ribs, and seafood. Join us for breakfast with a southern flair featuring sweet potato pancakes, biscuits and gravy, and much more. Planning a party? Marsh Landing's private dining rooms can accommodate groups from 8 to 80 people. While you visit, enjoy the historic pictures, artifacts, and stories that line the walls. Marsh Landing is truly a unique experience. Marsh Landing Restaurant, 44 North Broadway in historic downtown Fellsmere, or visit marshlandingrestaurant.com. Marsh Landing, old Florida cuisine at its best.
And we are back with Stan Gordon, a investigator into cryptoid sightings and UFOs and all sorts of paranormal phenomenon. When we took the break, we were kind of talking about Bigfoot, and he also said something about Thunderbirds, which I want to explore here in a minute. But as I was looking over some of the information that I have here, I noticed that on May 10th of last year, you were talking about two men who were riding on a rural road. I do not know why I am unable to speak. On a rural road in Fayette County, there in Pennsylvania, and they saw another, I guess, a Bigfoot that was even taller than the one that had been seen on January 1st. Can you elaborate on that a little bit for us, Stan?
Yeah, well, Fayette County, again, it's a county in Pennsylvania, very mountainous, a lot of woods and forestry area, and it's an area that historically has had a lot of Bigfoot activity. And this particular case, this was on, again, a very rural road. It was a pouring down rain the night it happened. And these two men are riding down the road, and suddenly this 7-foot-tall, hair-covered creature comes down from the bank from the left side of the road and stops right in the path of their car about 20 feet away from them. The driver slams on the brakes of the car, and the creature is standing there staring at them with these glowing red eyes. And these glowing red eyes, it's not always red, but sometimes orange, red, green, have been reported in many, many cases when there was no type of reflective light, for example. And so that's pretty interesting. But anyhow, for a short time, the two fellows in the car stared at the creature and stared back at them. And at one point, the driver of the car moved forward very slowly, and both men felt as the car made contact with the creature. At that point, it placed its hands on the front of the vehicle with the bumper of it against its legs, and soon after, it removed its hands from the car and then walked off below the road and walked off into the woods and was gone. But that is an area that has had many, many sightings by many, many people. And going back, reflecting back a number of years before, and you may be aware of this, back in 1973, we had the biggest outbreak of UFO and Bigfoot sightings in history here in Pennsylvania. It started actually January 1st with UFO sightings, hundreds and hundreds of UFO reports to the end of the year. And in the summer of 73, we had this major outbreak of Bigfoot sightings that began here in southwest Pennsylvania. It went on for weeks and months to 1974. It was incredible. And back in those days, you may remember, I had my first research group. It was called the Westmoreland County UFO Study Group. It was mainly scientists and engineers and research people. And we are doing this around our jobs, but we are responding to the cases 24 hours a day. And actually, very interesting, our group was taking on a lot of respectability back in those days because of the people that were involved. And the state police were calling my teams out to investigate this outbreak of sightings. So we were investigating very quickly and documenting these cases as they occurred. And, I always felt when I got involved with Bigfoot back in the late 60s in Pennsylvania, that was very likely some type of unknown primate. But as these events were unfolding, some very strange aspects began to turn up. For example, we would get calls out to certain locations where there had been a Bigfoot encounter. We would find trails of footprints that would just suddenly stop and disappear, but under the ground conditions, there should have been more tracks. And then we began to see a very interesting pattern. For example, we would have a Bigfoot sighting in a particular area. Within minutes to hours to days later, we would have a UFO sighting in the same area. And then we began to have amazing documented cases with UFOs and Bigfoot seen together at the same time and place. And since that time, I've looked into many, many Bigfoot accounts and other cryptids, and I find there's some very strange aspects to them. And the question has always been, why are there no bodies of Bigfoot? Well, we had some really strange cases, well documented at the time, which, as reluctant as I am to say it, suggests the possibility that we're dealing with something that might be interdimensional rather than a flesh and blood animal, which is why there's no bodies.
Well, that actually brings up a couple of questions, but the first one that popped into my mind, are you suggesting that Bigfoot's related to UFOs in some fashion?
Well, what I'm saying is there are well-documented cases where two are seen together, but I am not suggesting that they're extraterrestrial, because as you know as well as I do, there are many theories out there as to the unexplained category of UFOs. And I've said for years, I think we're dealing with more than one phenomena. Could a percentage be extraterrestrial? Possibly. Could some of these things be something else that we know little about? We're just theorizing about time travelers, something, from another reality, another dimension, which more and more, I've seen more and more data that might suggest that. Are some of these sometimes unknown natural phenomena? I don't think any of us have the answers, but there's a lot more to this than we understand. And one thing I did find many, many years ago, and this still is going on today, many low-level, close-range UFO sightings and many close-range encounters with cryptids. So Bigfoot, the Thunderbirds, the Black Panthers, all kind of other strange entity reports we get. They commonly occur in the vicinity of high-energy sources. So they occur around power plants, high-tension power lines, gas wells, gas lines, radio communication towers, reservoirs, different types of energy sources.
Well, you've mentioned it before, and you're talking about all kinds of strange creatures. Thunderbirds have always kind of fascinated me, and you're suggesting that you've got Thunderbird sightings in Pennsylvania?
Oh, many, many reports. Yeah, I mean, those sightings go back to the late 1800s, but in more recent years, in fact, I interviewed a fellow this afternoon who never reported it before, but as very common, many people were reluctant to come forward with these reports, but he had an encounter 2 years ago in eastern Pennsylvania, and he's going to be sending me a detailed account of what took place, but he was so reluctant to tell anybody because he's a businessman, and this thing, he said, was about 30 feet in front of him, rose up out of the field, passed right over his head, and he said it easily had a wingspan of about 15 feet.
So we're talking about something that we don't, I mean, is not in the Audubon Society's literature. We're talking about something that's just absolutely huge as opposed to, I guess, a condor. I don't know what the wingspan on a condor happens to be, but I know they can get fairly large, but you're not suggesting that it's a condor or an albatross or anything like that. You're talking about a undescribed bird.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's something that's very large. And, you know what? Excuse me. We have the topic of Thunderbirds, but while there's similarities in descriptions, got to excuse me, I'm still getting over this really bad cold. Some of these just look like huge, generally dark brown or black, huge birds with massive wingspans. In some cases, witnesses say they look like more like giant bats because they're featherless. And some people very reluctantly mention that they swear that what they saw looked more prehistoric, like a pterodactyl or pterotorn. So you've got similarities but differences in descriptions from widespread areas by many different eyewitnesses.
The one thing we're left with, though, we don't have any physical evidence of, well, the Bigfoot. We don't have any physical evidence of the Thunderbirds either. We don't find the bones. We don't find remains of the nests or their habitats or anything like that. Do you have an explanation for that?
Well, as I said now, again, theoretically, the more I look into many of these reports, and I hear these reports very often. I'm in touch with many other researchers that get these type of reports. You know, I've had my hotline open since 1969. It never stops ringing. Even today, people are calling in or by email coming in with current and past reports. And again, when you look at all these different cryptid reports, there's something going on here. And once again, you know, I'm looking at different patterns we're seeing, and I'm thinking that we might, again, for lack of a better term, be dealing with something that's interdimensional, that under certain conditions, these creatures come into our, and maybe certain UFOs as well, they come into our physical reality. They can look physically solid. They can leave physical evidence of time, and then they're gone. They come and they go. And as you know, there are many cases with UFOs where these things physically change form in front of witnesses. We had one very interesting case just a few months ago in this area. And so there's so much of this phenomena we just don't have the explanations for.
Okay. The reason I said it that way, I think we're going to move on to UFOs and specifically the Kecksburg UFO crash. But before we go in that direction, let me remind the listeners here of the online petition at stopkillingbigfoot.com. Take a look at that information, see if it's something that you're interested in, sign the petition to stop the hunting of the Bigfoot. I really don't think there's a good reason to do that, and it should be something that we all kind of attempt to stop. I know that other documentaries and some things that is in violation of what I would think of just the morality of the situation have been stopped by people just saying, no, it's too much. We don't need to do that. Having said all of that, now let's move on to the elephant in the room. The Kecksburg UFO crash from December of 1965. Stan, we've just got a couple of minutes here before we have to take a break. Give us a quick background of exactly what we're talking about here.
Well, it was a Thursday, late afternoon, and there were multiple reports coming in from many eyewitnesses over a widespread area from Canada, Michigan, Ohio, and Pennsylvania, of this brilliant fiery object, this fireball that was seen moving across the sky. And we know that about 4:47 p.m., brilliant fireball, a fiery object came in over the greater Pittsburgh area. Now, there's a lot we didn't know at the time. This is from the many years of research I've done from the day it happened. I started documenting as it was breaking on the news that day. But this object comes over the greater Pittsburgh area, moves out over Westmoreland County, comes over the city of Greensburg, and moved out roughly towards Route 30 east, but it makes a turn to the south. And as it's making the turn, it's seen sequentially by many people in these small communities out there. There's communities such as Marguerite and Mammoth and Pleasant Unity and Norvelt. And this thing keeps moving out in that general direction, keeps moving out towards the mountains of Laurelville, and it kind of hesitated. One witness ran out from his driveway, Bill Bullybush, who was near the town of Mammoth at the time, and he said it kind of hesitated over the mountain, began to turn, and came back towards Kecksburg. Other witnesses all along the path saw this thing. It made another turn and then dropped down to this wooded ravine. But the people who saw it come down that afternoon said it did not come down at a high rate of speed that you would think, for example, would be similar to a meteor coming down or a reentry of space debris. It wasn't doing that. It came down almost like a controlled landing. Witnesses told me it was moving like a small aircraft on approach to an airport, similar to that. And when it fell, shortly after, there was a column of kind of a bluish-gray smoke that rose up over the woods, and it dissipated very quickly. And now what I learned long over the years, I've been doing this investigation, because initially there was not a lot of information in the newspapers, and there were very few people we could find at that time. It was over a period of weeks and months and many years that I've interviewed hundreds of witnesses now, and we were able to gain a lot more information on this case, and it's just an amazing story, regardless of what the object was. The interesting part of the story, which of course you know, is that, one, after the object fell, We now know that some people came across this large metallic acorn-shaped object, semi-buried in the ground.
Stan,
yes.
let me stop you there because we got the acorn-shaped object on the ground. We're going to have to take a quick break. Your website is www.stangordon, that's all one word, .info. .com. You can take a look at that when you get a chance and learn some more about this, or you can take a look at www.kevinrandle.blogspot.com. We will be back right after this talking a little bit more about Kecksburg.
This is the X-Zone Broadcast Network, broadcasting worldwide on broadcast affiliates and satellite program providers, including CNN Broadcast Network, Sirius Satellite Network, Star Media, Good News Radio Network, Angel Broadcast Network, Wiki Broadcast Network, and WPBN TV. For more information on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, visit us at www.xzbn.net.
While science pursues fact, magic accesses the quantum level, bridging random facts to form truth. As long as science and magic remain separate and polarized, the truth cannot be known. I'm Gwilda Wiyaka. Join me on the Science of Magic radio program, dedicated to unification and evolution of consciousness. During each episode, I'll be speaking with experienced and respected scientists and mystics. From astrologers to astronomers, from medical doctors to shaman, the scientific method to dowsing and intuition, we'll weave together information from seemingly divergent practices to promote unity and enlightenment. Join me, Gwilda Wiyaka, and the Science of Magic right here on the Mutual Broadcast Network. For more information, visit www.thescienceofmagic.net.
Gibbs A. Williams, Ph.D., is a practicing psychoanalyst, supervisor, researcher, and author in New York City. Much of his life has been dedicated to understanding nature and the uses of meaningful coincidences or synchronicities. His radical and original non-Jungian, non-mystical, non-magical theory of synchronicities illuminates much of the fog surrounding this challenging and perplexing topic. His ideas and manners are fresh, presented in a style that is both entertaining and highly informative. He is also an expert on crisis intervention, specially focused on violence reduction for the police and citizens, mastering anxiety, frustration, and stress without the use of medication, and effectively preventing and treating heroin addiction. Dr. Williams can be contacted at his email address at gwwilliamsny11@aol.com or visit his website at Did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or Wi-Fi, you can still listen to the X-Zone radio show with Rob McConnell, The Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, X-1, Dimension X, Space Patrol, and every minute of the X-Zone Broadcast Network by calling 213-401-0080, courtesy of Audio Now. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. It saves your data plan and it's free if you have unlimited minutes. Call 213-401-0080 to listen on any phone, anytime, anywhere. Remember 213-401-0080 for the best of the paranormal, parapsychology, and sci-fi radio programming anywhere, 24/7, 365.
True healing must address 4 levels: physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual, for us to live joyful and productive lives. We tend to treat 3 of the 4, leaving the spiritual languishing. If you're tired of the same dysfunctional patterns cropping up in your life, Soul Balancing is for you. Trixie Phelps, owner and founder of Soul Balancing, is a naturally gifted energy healer trained in numerous esoteric forms, including shamanism. Trixie has created a powerful modality that safely and effectively clears your energetic field. A soul balancing session can remove interference, heal trauma, and restore your hope. Contact Trixie for a life-changing long-distance session today, www.soulbalancing.world.
And we are back with our guest, Stan Gordon. We're going to be talking about the Kecksburg UFO. His website, I am reliably informed by Stan Gordon, is www.stangordon.info. So if you want to take a look at that, there's a lot of information about the things we're talking about on his website, and you can gather as much information about it as you want. If you have a sighting or you have something that you've seen that you want to tell Stan about, that would be the way to do it. So when we went away, Stan, we were talking about the acorn-shaped object that was found in the woods near Kecksburg on December 9th, 1965. So pick it up at that point.
Okay, so after it falls, we've learned that some local residents went down to the wood ravine, and they came across this object semi-buried in the ground. And later, volunteer firemen came in because as multitudes of reports are coming in from around that area and people seeing this thing that passed across the sky, some people thought an aircraft was on fire. The fire department, the Kecksburg Fire Department, they set up a search for a possible downed aircraft in the area, and they were joined by other volunteer fire departments to come in that evening to search a large wooded area, thinking there was a possible downed aircraft there. And so what we later learned was that these firemen came in. They were going to set up a grid search to search that area. They had walkie-talkies. And it was in 1987, actually, when I had a very large public display at one of the local malls that, by sheer luck, a man and his family happened to walk by. I just had a little display on Kecksburg at the time because we still didn't have a lot of information on it. And this gentleman turned out to be Jim Romansky. And one of my associates was there talking to another person. I was out having lunch, and this guy was listening to their conversation. He said, "Excuse me, but are you talking about the incident in Kecksburg?" And they said, "Yes." And he said, I was one of the volunteer firemen on the search team that found the object. And immediately my associate pulled him over and got a hold of me, and he was very reluctant really to say much. He didn't want to get involved in it. He didn't want his family involved, but he did say that he would meet with us later to talk about it. He was not from Kecksburg himself, but after we interviewed him numerous times, he volunteered to go out to that area with us to see if he could find a location. He hadn't been there since 1965. There were certain details and landmarks he remembered that night. And but anyhow, interestingly, he took us right down to the area in this thick wooded area where he recalled this object had been. And that was interesting to us because in the mid-1980s, we had uncovered or had found what appeared to be a series of tree damage. And we found what appeared to be a trajectory where trees were knocked down the same direction, trees were broken out at different levels and on the top. And we had a pretty good estimate of where we felt this thing may have fallen, but up to this point, we had no eyewitnesses. And interestingly, this was right in the immediate area where we felt that the object had come down. So going back to the story now, back at that time on the grid search, they were searching around. Jim was out there that night with a walkie-talkie. They got a radio call that one of the other teams had found the object, which they thought was a downed aircraft, and he hurried over to the site with several other fellas, and they're standing on this little embankment looking at this thing and realize this is unlike anything they had ever seen before. They're walking around it, but they weren't going to touch it. And now Jim has been a machinist almost all his life. He knew metals. He said this thing was kind of an off-gold color, kind of a bronze off-gold color. He said it looked like one solid piece of metal. And he said there were no rivet marks, no seams, no fuselage. It was amazing. He just couldn't believe it. He said it looked like somebody took liquid metal and poured it into an acorn-shaped mold. And on the back part of the object, the raised-up back section, you would have, look, on the acorn, he said, there were what appeared to be markings that looked more like symbols. He said it looked like if you were a welder and you made a bead with a weld stick, that's what it looked like. And from memory, he remembered a number of different features of some of these things. There was like stars, circles, or broken lines. And he spent many years in libraries afterwards trying to look up ancient languages to see what was similar. He said closest he could recall was ancient Egyptian hieroglyphics. But Jim's story is interesting because of the fact that he got into a lot of detail. Other people confirmed a lot of different aspects of his story that we found. But while Jim and these other volunteer firemen are down in the woods for a short time, two men in trench coats come down, and they looked very stern. He believed one of them was carrying a Geiger counter. Right behind them are soldiers coming down through the woods with flashlights, and they were told at the site, this area is now quarantined, told the firemen to get out of there immediately. And he said the firemen, as they were leaving and the soldiers were coming down, they were so close to each other, they were shining their flashlight beams on each other. And there are so many details of this story that people don't realize and understand. And what's very intriguing is that of the hundreds of people I've interviewed, most of these people, even today, have not gone public. You got to remember, back in 1965, when this was occurring, a lot of the people who were on the scene were children and teenagers, and these people grew up later to be police officers, educators, attorneys, CEOs, very credible people, and many of them, for various reasons, didn't want to go public with their accounts. But they were able to give me detailed information, certain specific little details for many, many years that people didn't know or I didn't release that would confirm other people's accounts. So it's a very intriguing, amazing story. It would take us days to talk about so many things we uncovered.
Well, one of the things that struck me is there was a newsman, and I know you know his name. I've forgotten it at the moment, but he did a report on the radio within a couple of weeks of this happening, or a week of it happening, called "The Object in the Woods." And so he had a number of people that had seen this thing on the ground or whatever, or in the sky, interviewed for the program. Could you tell us a little bit about that? Simply because I think the aspect of censorship comes into play there.
Well, his name was John Murphy. He was the news director at WHJB in Greensburg. WHJB was the primary news facility at the time in the area. So as his story is breaking, actually how John got involved, he was out on another news assignment, and he got a radio call to go out to Route 30 east of Greensburg that something had happened out there, and he was told there had been a report of an explosion in the sky, and he hurried out to the area but didn't see anything. He went back to the station, and by the time he was getting back there, it was time to do the evening news broadcast, which he did. The phones were ringing off the hook. All people from all over the area were calling and reporting sighting of this object, and it actually was after the 6:30 news that a woman called in, and she said that whatever that object was that people saw, it apparently fell not far from her residence, not far from Kecksburg. She didn't see the initial object, but her young boy did. Now, he and his sister were outside riding their bikes. She did not see it. He caught out of the corner of his eye as it was going down, ran on and told the mother about it, and anyhow, she then called into WHJB. So John got all the information. He called the State Police Barracks in Greensburg, Troop A Barracks, gave them the information, and he got his information. He went out to Kecksburg. And there's a lot of things that a lot of people didn't know. What I found out was that John got on the scene about an hour before the State Police Fire Marshal and another investigator arrived on the scene with that mother and little boy and a small group of other people. And what we found out later was I interviewed people at the radio station, Mabel Mazza, who was the office manager, and John's wife at the time, Bonnie, and they were in radio contact with him. And John later told them that he went down into the woods, and he described seeing this unusual metallic acorn-shaped object semi-buried in the ground with the hieroglyphic markings on it. He apparently took pictures of it, and at least one person I can think of, I believe it was possibly two from years ago, saw the picture, the black and white photograph. It never became public. It was never seen. But anyhow, at some point, it was relayed to them that he had taken some photographs, but apparently some military on the scene at some point had confiscated the film and the camera, I believe it was, but he had a roll of film they didn't get, which is where that picture was on. But anyhow, to make the story more along the line of what took place and what was so interesting was the fact that he did a lot of investigation, a lot of research, interviewed a lot of witnesses, was putting together this radio special called Object in the Woods. Prior to the show airing, and this is confirmed by other people I interviewed who was at the station at the time, two men in suits, apparently government men, came in and asked for him. They went into his studio, shut the door. They were there for quite a while. When they left, he was very, very upset, and he actually told one of the managers there that they had confiscated some of the voice interviews that he had done with the witnesses. And the show was later broadcast in a censored fashion. So there were whole sections of that radio report that were blurred out.
Well, you said he got a picture, and the films were, and possibly his camera were confiscated, but he got away with a roll of film. The pictures never surfaced, as far as I know. Is that correct? Well,
here's what I was told. After the show aired, and after the show aired around that time, I can't exactly when, but right around that time period, and after these men showed up at the station, John was very excited about the story. This was his biggest news story. It was getting a lot of attention. He was documenting it. He was getting a radio show together, and then his demeanor changed. He didn't want to talk about it anymore. When people would ask him about it, he would just brush it off. All his notes, all his information disappeared, and he wouldn't even talk about it to people who were very close to him. So a lot of people feel that somebody put some pressure on him to quiet down what he may have uncovered.
But the point is, the picture was seen by one or two people, but it never surfaced.
Never surfaced publicly, no. Some people at the station saw it at the time, but I don't know of any accounts of anybody seeing it out of the station.
So this wonderful piece of documentation has vanished.
And it's not only that one. I have heard for years that there are other photographs out there that people took at the time of the object down in the woods, and also of the object on the military flatbed tractor trailer that night. And I've talked to people over the years who saw pictures. We've never found any of those pictures. We hear rumors of it. I believe that somebody in this area where it happened may have it in a scrapbook somewhere, or some of their family pictures somewhere, but so far they've never surfaced.
Okay. Well, we're going to have to take another break here. When we come back, I want to talk about some of the explanations that have been offered for the case, including a peer-reviewed article, I guess, appeared in the Journal of the Royal Astronomical Society of Canada that suggests this was a meteor as opposed to any kind, well, that would be an extraterrestrial visitor, I suppose, but not an alien spacecraft. And one of the newer theories that it was a GE Mark II reentry vehicle that possibly accounts for this. So we'll talk about that when we come back with Stan Gordon on this. If you get a chance, take a look at his website, which we've talked about here already, which is www.stangordon.info, where you can learn more about the Kecksburg crash if you want to. Also take a look at stopkillingbigfoot.com, and of course www.kevinrandle.blogspot.com. We will return with more from Stan Gordon right after this, so stick around.
This is the X-Zone Broadcast Network, broadcasting worldwide on broadcast affiliates and satellite program providers, including CNN Broadcast Network, Sirius Satellite Network, Star Media, Good News Radio Network, Angel Broadcast Network, Wiki Broadcast Network, and WPBN TV. For more information on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, visit us at www.xzbn.net.
Did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or Wi-Fi, you can still listen to the X-Zone Radio Show with Rob McConnell, The Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiaka, X-1, Dimension X, Space Patrol, and every minute of the X Zone Broadcast Network by calling 213-401-0080, courtesy of Audio Now. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. It saves your data plan, and it's free if you have unlimited minutes. Call 213-401-0080 to listen on any phone, anytime, anywhere. Remember 213-401-0080 for the best of the paranormal, parapsychology, and sci-fi radio programming anywhere, 24/7, 365.
I am Dr. Carl O'Helvey, founder, president of a new cancer foundation focusing on evidence-based physical, mental, and spiritual interventions, including natural cancer cures, prayer, meditation, affirmations, nutrition, and other related holistic cancer prevention and cure modalities. These are used in cancer education, research, and financing care. I ask for your help to continue this important work by donating at www.holisticcancerfoundation.com.
Wouldn't you love to know the secret to everything? I'm Dr. Kimberly McGeorge, and on The Secret to Everything, we will merge the practical with open investigation into all realms of the mysterious. We will talk to cutting-edge alternative health practitioners, those who inspire and motivate you in business and life, and of course, we will share stories of the paranormal, conspiracy, and cryptozoology. You will transform because of the frequency I carry, the frequencies my guests carry. Life may never be the same after you listen to this program, for the secret to everything is for you, the listener, for those who desire more in every area of their lives and believe that it can still be found. Listen and discover thesecrettoeverything.com.
Little children aren't the only ones afraid of the dark. Millions of soldiers return from war zones with PTSD, anger, frustration, fear, and loneliness, much of which surfaces during the darkness of the night. You have the chance to change the lives of these American heroes. Songs and Stories for Soldiers.us provides free MP3 players for these men and women. With a list of 3 million songs in 16 different styles, 100,000 audiobooks, and 30,000 old-time radio programs, every veteran can find something to soothe and comfort them at no cost. All our players contain an 8-hour audio program designed to help veterans fall asleep. With 1,500 plus vets now participating, it's our goal to deliver 10,000 audio players this year. Go to our website at songsandstoriesforsoldiers.us. Help us help a veteran make it through the night.
You're listening to the X Zone Broadcast Network, www.xzbn.net.
As usual, we've opened a lot of doors and gotten a lot of information about a case, and we are only just barely scratching the surface. Stan was talking about the roster of witnesses to the Kecksburg case, some of the things that have developed. I've actually got a copy of the program Object in the Woods, courtesy of Stan Gordon, so I was able to listen to that. But in the intervening years, there have been a number of explanations suggested for what was really seen, including a bolide. And there was an article in the Journal of the Royal Astronomical Society of Canada. It was volume 61, and it starts on page 184. And just look up, I guess it's December 9th, 1965 Fireball, and you can easily find a link to it. That suggests that what was seen was not an alien spacecraft, not an interdimensional craft, nothing unusual. It was an extraterrestrial visitor, but it happened to be a natural phenomenon. I know, Stan, that you're aware of this article. What's your response to that?
Well, of course, it's a very interesting article, and there's a lot of people who have talked about and debated it over the years. And there's a lot of different theories concerning that aspect of the case. And I know there's people like Dave Rudiak, for example, who has looked into the report and looked into some things about it that he was, trying to figure out more about and trying to get a better idea of, and questioning some aspects of it. But, one of the theories is that, and among different theories about that aspect of the case is, was it the same object? Could this object that came in Kecksburg been part of another object? Could there possibly been two objects in the sky at the same time? I think what we have to realize is that we could completely rule out the sightings up in Michigan in that area, because what is very well documented is that a fiery object definitely came in over the greater Pittsburgh area, observed by multitudes of people, moved out in the Westmoreland County. Whenever that object was, fell into a wooded ravine. The interesting thing is, of course, the military responded to the scene very quickly, very well documented in newspaper accounts at the time. I interviewed the reporters who were on the scene, some who interacted with the military, multitudes of witnesses who saw military on the scene. And I later learned, after interviewing a military person, checked his background out, he told me he was a part of the air police that guarded the object when it came in during the early morning hours, December 10th, to Lockbourne Air Force Base near Columbus, Ohio. And anyhow, he said that when it came in through an entrance to the base not normally used, and that's verified by more than one source, that the flatbed tractor trailer with a tarped object on it was placed into a hangar. They set up a security perimeter around it, and they were given a shoot-to-kill order to anybody that approached that hangar without the proper clearance. Now, he told me he didn't stay on that team much longer, but he heard that truck and the cargo did not stay at the base that long. It continued on to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, and later I was contacted by other people who told me exactly where on that base, what building this object was taken to, and it was not the infamous Hangar 18.
Well, yeah, I've often thought that the idea of Hangar 18 came out of a very bad science fiction movie in the late 1970s, early 1980s called Hangar 18. The hangars at Wright-Patterson were numbered differently, so it didn't matter. But that really kind of, I mean, you talked about other witnesses, you talked about it being trucked out of there, you talked about military people in the woods, but it really doesn't address the article, which suggests that this was a meteor fall and that remnants of the meteor were recovered, I think, in Ontario, Canada, or in Canada, up in Canada. So what do you say about that?
Well, what I say is that, again, there's unanswered questions. Again, can I say for sure that it was the same object? We don't know. We've always speculated it was. But once again, could have this object been a part of something that was seen in the sky and separated? Could there have been coincidentally two objects in the sky at the same time? I've got to look at what we can document, and what we can document is that the multitudes of witnesses from this part of Pennsylvania, actually from Ohio into Pennsylvania, coming into Westmoreland County, coming into the crash site, witnesses all along the path that saw the object. It made the turn to the south, went out towards the mountains, hesitated, came back, changed direction, came back towards Kecksburg, made another turn and went down into the woods. Multitudes of people and actually some witnesses saw it pass very low over their head right before it fell, so they were able to see it in good detail. And then the witnesses on the ground, and now actually in the last 2 years we actually have a military source who finally came forward, who was on the scene, and he did see the object himself.
Well, let's take a turn, since you keep talking about the object turning. Is it John Ventura there in Pennsylvania?
John Ventry.
Ventry. Okay, I stand corrected there. I don't know the gentleman. I think I may have spoken to him one time. He came out just recently, as a matter of fact, that it was the GE Mark II reentry vehicle. And I'm sure you have information that suggests that might not be the proper answer.
Well, again, there have been many, many different theories brought forward about what this object was, and numerous people have contacted me saying over the years that they knew for certain what it was. And this goes back to a family I interviewed who was actually interviewed by an Air Force officer they were involved in the Kecksburg incident. They were told by the Air Force officer it was a Gemini capsule that had been expelled in the area, and of course we found out that wasn't true. Another man contacted me and told me he was aware of a project in Canada where a projectile was fired from a giant gun from a railroad car in Canada, and that's what it was. Another man told me he was certain he had information it was a Soviet ICBM that went out of control. It just goes on and on and on. And of course, in more recent years, a lot of people believe it was the Nazi bell, which again is another theory, but I've never seen any evidence it became a reality. And then John and another person he was working with came out with this theory during the 50th anniversary of the case that it was his GE Mark II reentry vehicle. And, I've debated John about this, and I looked in their reports, and I don't know if you have time to go over it, but there was a number of details and reports that I questioned, and I questioned John on some of these things too. But because something looks similar, that doesn't mean that that's what it was. And I know on your blog and others were people who were involved in the space program or others who were very much aware of these space devices, and they pretty much ruled out a lot of the data that John had in his report.
Well, like you said, there's been a lot of these kind of explanations that have been offered in the past for the crash, and this was just the latest one that had come about, and I thought I'd give you a chance to maybe chat a little bit about that. I guess we're winding down here, of course, but I get from your discussion here that you're not necessarily saying it's an extraterrestrial craft. You're saying that it was some kind of solid object that fell. It fell in the Greenberg area, and that, or the Kecksburg area, I should say, and that it was retrieved by the military, but it might have had its genesis interdimensionally. It might be something else that we don't understand. Could it possibly have been a experimental craft from the U.S. that had gotten away from them, and they wanted to keep it secret at the time? What do you think it is? What do you think fell?
As I've said to so many people after so many years, I still keep an open mind to all possibilities. I've said for years that two of my theories were that, one, it was a very secretive, very advanced man-made space probe that has some type of reentry control capability, or could it possibly be extraterrestrial? I don't have the answers. I'm convinced that something fell from the sky, which we still don't have a definite explanation for. And but also, there's so much more to the story which we don't have time to get into. And it's just a fascinating account, regardless of what it was. I mean, the evidence is very strong now that there was indeed a cover-up. The government did not tell us the truth about what it was. I have no doubt that the military did recover the object. It's been confirmed by various sources now. We know exactly where it went to back in 1965. Where it is today, we're really not sure.
Which is kind of the same thing we can say about the Roswell case. Something fell at Roswell. It may have been extraterrestrial. We know where it went, but we don't know where it happens to be today. Well, Stan, I don't know what else we can do in the very, very short time that we have left, other than mention that your website is www.stangordon.info. So if you want to follow up on the Kecksburg case, take a look at that. I did a book a couple of years ago called Crash When UFOs Fall from the Sky, which you can find. I had a long section about Kecksburg in there, and Stan provided a great deal of information for me about that, including some photographs that we printed there, so you can learn a little bit more there. Stan, anything else that you want to mention in the very short time we have left?
It's just the fact that there are still people out there on occasion, even in recent years, on occasion I'll run into somebody who knows a relative or a friend who was involved in Kecksburg. I'll run into a person who was actually there. Most of them are up in their 70s and 80s now. And some of these people are still giving me some really detailed accounts of what they recall from that time period. It's interesting because the people involved in this case, they're not publicity seekers. Very few want any publicity. And in so many of these cases, we would get information from a relative or a friend or a neighbor, or we will get anonymous tips, and we will track these people down. So
Stan,
many people.
Stan,
Yes.
I hate to cut you off, but we're out of time. So
Okay,
thank
well,
you
it's good talking to you,
thank you
Kevin.
very much. For those interested, take a look at www.kevinrandle.blogspot.com and take a look at Roswell in the 21st century. About that case, we will return in 167 hours, and we will be joined by Don Ledger at that time. Thank you for listening.